AERO26, one aircraft stopped people in their tracks, even though it hasn't flown yet. A brand new Italian ultralight arrived at AERO26, claiming supercar speed, and suddenly everyone wanted a closer look.
That at the beginning we was thinking to call synthesis, because it has to be a synthesis of 20 years of experience in the market. It means that we have different models. We start
AERO Friedrichshafen 2026 was already packed with insane machines, business jets, helicopters, electric aircraft, experimental concepts. Everywhere you looked, companies were trying to prove they had the future of aviation figured out. And honestly, with nearly 860 exhibitors and tens of thousands of visitors walking those halls, it took a lot to stand out. But then, people started crowding around one airplane. Not a massive jet, not some billion-dollar military project. A tiny Italian ultralight sitting quietly under the lights. Low wing, sharp nose, aggressive stance. It looked less like an airplane and more like something Ferrari would build if Ferrari suddenly decided to enter aviation. And the weirdest part? The TerrOne hadn't even flown yet. That's what made the whole thing feel almost unreal. Usually at these events, aircraft earn attention because they've broken records or survived years of testing. But this thing was getting attention purely from its presence. People were stopping mid-walk just to stare at it. Cameras came out instantly. Conversations started before anyone even knew the specs. And then someone said it. This is the Ferrari of lightweight aircraft. That line spread fast, because once you looked at the TerrOne, you kind of understood it immediately. The body was unbelievably sleek. The curves looked sculpted instead of engineered. Even standing still, the aircraft looked fast. And in a hall full of airplanes, that's incredibly hard to do. But here's where things got even stranger. Promecc Aerospace wasn't calling this a concept. They weren't presenting it like some distant dream. They were talking about production timelines, test schedules, customer deliveries, and almost like they already knew this thing was going to work. And honestly, that confidence made people even more curious, because now everyone had the same question in their head. How does an aircraft with zero flight history become one of the biggest stars of AERO26? Because the TerrOne didn't appear out of nowhere. To most people at AERO26, it looked like a sudden surprise. But for Promecc Aerospace, this moment had apparently been building for almost 2 decades. During the interview, the company described the aircraft as a synthesis of everything they had learned over 20 years in the ultralight world. And honestly, that one word explained a lot. This wasn't just another prototype chasing headlines. It was supposed to be the final evolution of their entire lineup. First came the Sparviero, then the Freccia, then the Pegaso. Every aircraft taught them something different about lightweight structures, handling, efficiency, and speed. And over time, Promecc became known for building ultralights that looked cleaner, sharper, and more aggressive than most competitors. The TerrOne was supposed to combine all of it. You could actually see hints of their older aircraft in the design, especially the Freccia. But this looked more extreme, more refined. Almost like they had removed every unnecessary shape from the airplane until only speed remained. And then there was the carbon fiber. Not just panels, not cosmetic pieces. The company kept emphasizing that the structure itself was deeply optimized around lightweight carbon construction. That mattered because in ultralight aviation, every kilogram changes everything. More speed, better climb, better efficiency. And suddenly the TerrOne started making more sense. This wasn't a random ambition. These were years of aerodynamic obsession, slowly turning into one airplane. But then, the conversation shifted away from history and toward numbers that honestly sounded almost impossible for an ultralight. Because Promecc wasn't just building another sleek aircraft. They were entering what some pilots were already calling the 400 km/h war.
Yeah, you are maximizing on top speed.
Yes.
So what is the top speed?
Now, logically, the project of the top speed it is 360, but
360.
aircraft it is never fly before. In the next few months, we will complete the test flight for our destination.
And this was the exact moment the TerrOne became bigger than aviation. Because when the interviewer compared the aircraft to a Ferrari, something changed in the conversation. Suddenly, this wasn't just about climb rates or fuel burn anymore. It became about identity, about culture, about why Italian machines always seem to feel emotional before they even move. The Promecc representative smiled immediately when he heard the comparison. This is the Ferrari from the lightweight aircraft. And honestly, nobody disagreed. Then he started talking about Italy's Motor Valley, Ferrari, Lamborghini, decades of obsession with engines, performance, and design. You could tell this wasn't corporate marketing language. It sounded personal, almost like he genuinely believed Italy approaches machines differently from everyone else. And maybe that's why the TerrOne looked the way it did. Because most ultralights are designed to be practical first, functional, efficient. But the TerrOne looked dramatic. Sharp canopy, curved fuselage, low aggressive stance. Even people who knew nothing about aviation were stopping to look at it. That's rare, really rare. And the crazy thing is, appearance matters more in aviation than people realize, especially at events like AERO. Pilots don't just buy performance, they buy emotion. They buy the feeling an aircraft gives them before the engine even starts. The TerrOne understood that instantly. Even the carbon fiber finish added to the effect. It didn't look mass-produced. It looked handcrafted, precise, expensive, like something designed in the same country that builds supercars. But behind all that beauty, there was an even crazier promise hiding underneath. Because Promecc wasn't just claiming this thing looked fast. They were claiming it could challenge speeds most people thought ultralights could never reach. And honestly, this is where the entire crowd at AERO26 started paying very close attention. And this is where things started sounding almost ridiculous. Because once Promecc began talking numbers, people around the TerrOne booth suddenly stopped treating it like a beautiful design exercise. Now it felt like a direct challenge to the entire ultralight industry. The claimed cruise speed? 360 kilometers per hour. And with the Rotax 916 is engine. They were talking about nearly 390 kilometers per hour true airspeed. For context, that's deep into territory most people simply do not associate with ultralights. Especially not one weighing only 295 kilograms empty. That part shocked people even more. Because lightweight aircraft usually force compromises somewhere. Maybe they're fast but uncomfortable. Maybe efficient but unstable. But Promecc was basically saying this aircraft could do everything at once. Fast, light, efficient, comfortable. And honestly, that's where skepticism started creeping in. Because aviation people know how dangerous big promises can be. Still, the numbers kept getting crazier. A climb rate up to 2,600 feet per minute. A takeoff roll of around 100 meters. Landing distance around 200 meters. Powered by proven Rotax 915 IS and 916 IS engines instead of experimental setups. Suddenly, pilots weren't just impressed anymore. They were trying to figure out how this was even possible. And then people started whispering about the 400 kilometers per hour club. That's basically the unofficial race happening right now in high-performance ultralights. Every manufacturer wants to build the fastest legal ultralight possible, and the TerrOne looked like Promecc's direct entry into that battle. But here's the thing. The aircraft hadn't flown yet, so now the entire aviation community was stuck between excitement and doubt. Some people were convinced Promecc had created the future of ultralights. Others thought the numbers sounded too ambitious to become reality. And honestly, both sides had valid reasons. But somehow, The innovations weren't just about speed, because once people started looking closer at the aircraft itself, they noticed details that made the TerrOne feel far more futuristic than anyone expected. And that's where the story gets even more interesting. Wait, you're watching right now but not subscribed to the channel. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button so we can move on with the video. You did? Okay, cool. Now back to the video. But here's what started changing people's minds. Once pilots stopped looking at the TerrOne from the outside and actually studying the details, they realized this aircraft wasn't only designed to be fast. It was designed to feel expensive, almost luxurious. And in the ultralight world, that's extremely unusual. Most ultralights are brutally simple: thin seats, tight cabins, minimal systems. Everything is sacrificed to save weight. But the TerrOne followed a completely different philosophy. Promecc talked about electrically adjustable seats, an electric canopy, and a cockpit nearly 120 centimeters wide. Suddenly, pilots weren't imagining a cramped ultralight anymore. They were imagining themselves inside it. And honestly, that's when competitors probably became nervous. Experienced pilots immediately understood what Promecc was trying to build. Not a simple weekend flyer, but something combining racing performance with the feeling of sitting inside a modern sports car. Then the engineering details became even more impressive. The aircraft reportedly uses a full carbon fiber structure for rigidity and weight reduction. The cockpit visibility was designed to feel panoramic, while the avionics setup was described as IFR ready, making the aircraft feel serious rather than stripped down. Then came the tail system. During the interview, Promecc explained the tail changes angle depending on flight phase, helping optimize the angle of attack during takeoff and cruise. That immediately stood out because features like that usually belong to far more advanced aircraft categories. Even the wing became a talking point, with multiple airfoil concepts balancing speed, stability, and efficiency. Add retractable gear capability into the mix, and suddenly the TerrOne sounded less like an ultralight and more like a miniature superplane. And standing around it at AERO26, people could genuinely feel the ambition radiating from every surface, curve, and engineering decision there. Now hold on, because this changes everything. At the time of AERO26, the TerrOne had never completed a flight. Not one. And in aviation, that's a huge deal, because airplanes can look incredible on the ground. They can have beautiful renders, ambitious specifications, polished carbon fiber, massive promises. But until the wheels leave the runway, nobody truly knows what the aircraft is. That's why the atmosphere around the TerrOne felt so unusual. Half the people around the aircraft looked genuinely excited. The other half looked cautiously skeptical. You could almost feel the tension between those two emotions every time someone discussed the performance numbers. Because if Promecc actually achieved even close to their targets, this aircraft could seriously disrupt the ultralight market. But if they missed, the aviation world has seen that story before too. Promecc sounded remarkably calm about it. They explained that flight testing was expected soon in southern Italy, specifically in the Puglia region. The representative even clarified something important that many people missed. This is not a prototype. That line completely changed how some attendees viewed the project, because according to Promecc, the aircraft on display was already the first production aircraft. Not a rough concept, not a temporary demonstrator, a production intent machine preparing for real-world validation. Still, that first flight remained everything, because aviation is brutal. tiny aerodynamic issues become massive problems in the air. Weight distribution changes handling instantly. Cooling systems behave differently under real loads. High-speed stability can completely transform once an aircraft actually accelerates through the sky. And Promecc knew that. That's why they kept discussing testing schedules instead of making wild guarantees. Their timeline suggested around 10 months before orders and production could fully begin after flight validation and performance confirmation. But honestly, the uncertainty may have made people want the aircraft even more. Because humans are naturally drawn toward ambitious projects, standing right on the edge between dream and reality, especially in aviation, especially when the machine looks this beautiful. People at AERO26 weren't just looking at an aircraft, they were looking at possibility, at the chance that maybe, just maybe, somebody had finally built the ultralight equivalent of an Italian supercar. And that emotional connection started happening before the aircraft even flew, which, honestly, is incredibly rare. So now the real question became something deeper. Why were pilots already emotionally attached to an airplane they had never seen in the air? And the answer says a lot about both aviation and human nature.
Where is your test ground? Where do you fly it? Where's your
At the time
home
being
airport?
factory in south of Italy, and we think that the test will be in the south of Italy, in Puglia.
Okay. So all the best.
And honestly, this is what the TerrOne story was really about the entire time. Not just speed, not just engineering, not even the performance numbers. It was about emotion. Because great aircraft, the ones people remember, almost always create a feeling before they prove anything technically, and the TerrOne somehow managed to do exactly that at AERO26. The second people saw it, they started imagining things. What it would feel like to fly, what that cockpit would sound like at full power, what cruising near 400 kilometers per hour in an ultralight might actually feel like. And once that imagination starts, people get emotionally invested very fast. That's why the crowd around the aircraft kept growing. Some were experienced pilots, others were aviation photographers. Flight schools looked interested too, especially because the aircraft appears positioned perfectly for the upcoming Mosaic regulations that could expand opportunities in the United States. But honestly, most people were there because the TerrOne looked special. It had a presence. The same way certain supercars attract attention before anyone asks about horsepower. The same way Italian design often feels emotional first and logical second. Promecc understood that psychology extremely well, and they leaned into it completely. The company talked about test flight invitations, factory visits in southern Italy, production timelines, not like people observing a distant concept, but like future owners already waiting for delivery day. That's powerful marketing, but also risky, because ambitious aviation projects naturally attract attention. People want to believe somebody can push the category further, faster, sleeker, more exciting, especially in ultralight aviation, where innovation sometimes feels limited by regulations and practicality. The TerrOne broke that feeling instantly. It reminded people that aircraft can still feel dramatic. And maybe that's why the Ferrari comparison kept coming back throughout the event. Not because the TerrOne was trying to imitate a car, but because it triggered the exact same emotional reaction. Excitement, curiosity, desire. But now, everything depends on what happens next. Because the real question isn't whether people want the TerrOne anymore. It's whether reality can actually match the dream. And honestly, the entire aviation world seems to be waiting for that first flight. The aircraft that captured AERO26 hadn't even flown yet. And somehow, that made the story even bigger. In aviation, attention like this is incredibly rare. Now everything comes down to one moment, the first takeoff. So would you trust an ultralight chasing 400 kilometers per hour, And do you think the TerrOne can actually deliver